Epic Loot Radio. Epic Loot Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Epic Loot Radio. Brian with AKA Joyful Arcade, otherwise known as Mark, joining you guys today to talk about all the latest developments, especially that unfolded in the last, feels like 3 days. It feels like in 3 days, so much has changed within the gaming industry, and the reactions have been quite phenomenal. But Mark, you're a game maker. You do things. You're a YouTuber. You've been on the podcast before, and we're becoming fast friends, playing some Halo together. And also, if you guys are interested, this coming Thursday, Halo Community Game Night with Season 5. We'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. But I'm going to give you the show floor. What do you got working on? What are you excited to promote? And where can people find you? And then we got a lot to talk about.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks again for having me, Brian. It's always a joy to be here and hang out. As you said, I'm a co-founder and producer over at Devour Games. We're a small indie game company. We released one game on the Nintendo Switch called Depiction. It's a puzzle game. It's perfect time to pick it up since we have some Halloween themed DLC as well, and we're actively working on a lot of new projects. But it's hard. We've talked about it before. Being a game maker, it is not easy. So even if you have marginal success, to make a living off that is a challenge. So I have a full-time job, and like you said, I do a lot of other things like YouTube content creation and all that good stuff. So.
That's awesome, dude. Well, first things first, obviously being that you are a co-founder for a game studio, we just saw the largest acquisition in gaming history happen. And the reaction has been all over the board. What is your takeaway from the fact that that deal is now done? I'm sure there's going to be some interesting legal filings that are going to, happen down the road. But how do you feel about that? Is that something that's good for the industry, bad for the industry, neutral?
So my initial reaction is I'm so happy it's done. I grew so exhausted about every other day there's another article, someone pontificating about what could happen. In this case, I think you've talked about this, and I agree with you here. Is the idea of having more games to more people is always a good thing. So whether it comes by nature of consolidation or not, I'm always happy to have games easier to access, if you will. And in this case, I think Activision-Blizzard, that portfolio of games, I think it lines up nicely with Xbox vision and strategy too. So I would say overall, this is a win. There's always the question about what happens next, but yeah, I'm excited. The weird thing to me is to think about Crash Bandicoot as an Xbox mascot.
Property.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I'm excited, and like I said, I'm just happy to see it done with, and hoping to get those games on Game Pass soon, so I don't have to buy a Call of Duty now every year.
I think the current one is going to have to be purchasable, because I think that's because they got a PlayStation contract that expires in the year. So this is going to be kind of that last hurrah for the new launch. But I do expect that we're going to see a huge backlog of titles rolling out over the course of just the next, even the year alone. They've got so much IP and backlog history that it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And that's just going to be more value. And what will be really interesting for me to see is that, does this change the Game Pass subscriber numbers? It will. I would assume that there'd be a monicum increase, but does all of a sudden was it like everybody sitting back and saying, all right, if this deal goes through, then I'm going to go ahead and pick up the subscription. That's kind of what I'm going to watch to see. The other thing I'm interested to see is if Battle.net becomes the Microsoft Xbox PC storefront. I think Battle.net is one of the premier systems that I would say rivals Steam, but they don't sell other games, and Xbox does. I'm hoping, because especially with all my issues with the Xbox app and just Windows installing games, I'm hoping that they're like, you know what, we're just going to label this Battle.net, Xbox Battle.net or whatever, and then start to integrate all the games in one ecosystem in the long run. But I from a developer's perspective, that's a lot of work. That's
yeah. Yeah, the technology in Battle.net is superior. I don't know what type of integration would have to happen from Microsoft going to that, but even from a brand recognition standpoint, I think keeping Battle.net would be a win as well. Because
Yes.
didn't Blizzard attempt to get rid of Battle.net a few years ago? Didn't they switch it up? I could be
We're gonna
wrong
have
there,
to
but
see if anybody in chat has a
yeah,
confirmation because, like, the only thing that in my mind kind of starts to correlate is the Square Enix, Play Online browser,
yeah,
and it's to see like they were all kind of starting in this one. Like, we want to have an ecosystem where people connect into our games, and then essentially Square Enix never, didn't continue to invest in that, and thus it ends up being this relic of the past. Where then you see Battle.net becoming like a real easy way to communicate cross game within their ecosystem. So I don't know. As long as they continue to come to Steam, as long as one of the things that I've really appreciated about Xbox over the course of the last couple of years is that just put your games where gamers are. Stop trying to draw people into an ecosystem so that, like you can say, we've captured this percentage of the audience. Just put your games out there, let gamers play. They'll be the ones that decide what should live and what should die, as opposed to some arbitrary, I guess falsehood in this case.
yeah. I think that's going to happen, right? I mean, you saw that big movement over the last decade of every publisher getting their own launcher, and now it seems to be
Yeah.
switching back with Ubisoft, and even before
EA.
this merger,
EA's was awful.
Oh yeah, I don't want to get into that. I still get an error message every time I open my Xbox browser because it tries to open my EA launcher with it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the vision people are pursuing now because I do think they realize, hey, it's the edge we get by having this competitive. It's only available here. That margin is not as great as what you see when you just put it everywhere for the player to pick up.
Right. So one of the things that I see chat talking about, and I think it's a really interesting topic, Zay, and I'm sorry I'm butchering your name here, says hopefully WoW, the sub, will be a part of Game Pass. What do you think about just that possibility? Do you see that being something that they'd want to do with World of Warcraft?
I would think they're exploring it at the very least. I don't know how you don't explore it with how big of a property World of Warcraft is. I don't know where WoW is in terms of numbers, if it's been, falling or increasing slowly with the most recent expansion. But I think they explore it. I think it's quite possible that they package it in there if they see it worthwhile. And honestly, I think you hinted at this in the title, but something I even thought at the beginning of this merger starting, the deal going, being discussed is, do they bring this to console as well after
100%
games
they
like
will.
yeah.
That this WoW, I would say, like, I would put money on it if we're going to bet that this is going to come to console. I don't know if it's going to come within a short period of time. Like, if we're going to time box, like, how long do we think this could be? I would think at least somewhere around, unless they've already been working towards that goal. So if the work has already been going on, this throws my timetables off. But assuming that this is an acquisition, we see all these MMOs coming to console, it just makes sense to sit here and say, why isn't and we'll just say, for like, I'm not the WoW guy, so like I would just say the king of the MMO, which really redefined the genre for this, for the last several decades. Why would that be the one that is not on console? And sure, there's plenty of counter arguments about add-ons and things like that. And so that can then shift into like, well, do they decide to do a WoW 2? Do they decide to sit here and say like, okay, maybe that isn't going to be on there, but we want to have some representation on a console for this IP and for this property. Now, Despus in chat says, I think that there would be perks for WoW underneath the PC Game Pass side of things, but I do not think that they would include a sub for WoW, though maybe it could be some time to time. And I think what this is really interesting is that we know there's an optional sub for ESO, and that is not included in Game Pass. So then, based off of that alone, I don't see them doing that, but I do agree that there could be some various perks to say, hey, if you got Game Pass and guess what, you have you're a part of World of Warcraft, maybe there's something that you're going to get in game. Maybe there's some kind of loot, almost in a way like you see with the Prime Gaming setup, where you got all this like once a month, just claim your loot and your rewards. However, it would be an incredible power play to sit here and say, and then all of a sudden, because the only thing I could see that would really drive that would be, imagine if you want to take Game Pass to, let's say, 30 million or 35 million, whatever that number is. And if you could start to count your WoW subscriptions as a part of that, like overall number, all of a sudden, when it comes down to reporting, you're like, yeah, it does include players who are playing World of Warcraft. but it also includes everybody else who's doing whatever they need. And so that would be really almost in a way eating kind of their own tail for at least a little while, but it would pad the numbers immensely.
Yeah, they're definitely looking at different strategies, right? When you get a brand that big that has that much power, they're going to examine any type of potential route they could take to bring more value to their existing customers and their new customers who are loyal to that brand as well. So we'll see. I again, consoles. I think console would be a game changer for me too. After playing Final Fantasy on console, and then wanting to go back to WoW at times, there's just been moments where I'm like, it'd be great if I could just be sitting on my couch right now. Like again, that alone will
just an option, right? Like that's one of the things that I know I rub a lot of gamers the wrong way because they're like, oh, Brian likes cloud gaming, and they think that I'm making the argument that all PC and hardware gaming will go away. It's like, no, I like this as an option. That really works well for me. It doesn't mean it's going to work well for everybody, but more options for the players. And this kind of goes right back to the idea that put games everywhere. And I know that that's a big shift to where we've come from within, especially the console space, into a potential future that we don't know whether it will work out or not, or be good, or suffer in that case. But for one, am like when I look at just the handheld market alone right now, we're seeing an explosion of people making new handhelds that all have different price points and different features. And we haven't seen that because nobody could step into the ring with Nintendo. But because of both Nintendo not releasing a new handheld for a long, long time, we'll see what happens next year. But also the fact that games can be played on these systems and these different services, it opens it up. And so we're seeing a lot of innovation in that space. And that's what I, for one, am like, yeah, let's just put games where people are, because people are going around and emulating the Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom to get it to 60 frames a second anyway. And I'm just like, come on, I don't want to champion that as an idea, but I hope that it puts some kind of fire under Nintendo's ass to sit here and say, okay, we're gonna actually have like a real nice offering that's gonna hopefully appease at least gamers for several years to come. But yeah, that's gonna be wild.
Yeah, cloud gaming is interesting. I agree with you where to me, it's more of a both and. I don't think it's going to ever attempt to replace the more traditional approach to console gaming or PC gaming. But the reality is as well, a lot of people here, I would assume United States or in the West, benefit from being able to afford a lot of the technologies that make console gaming possible. Mm-hmm. When I've traveled overseas for work, I'm in countries like Vietnam or the Philippines. There's a ton of gamers there, and they game on mobile devices. And these publishers realized a decade plus ago that, hey, if we can invest in cloud infrastructure and we could bring our console games over the cloud to these players, we increase our player base immensely. And I think that's also a part of the equation. Is it's not just for us, but it's for a lot of the other players across the globe that they're trying to reach.
You're thinking about India, you're thinking about China, you're thinking about like a lot of these emerging markets that don't actually have any brand loyalty to a console. And for them, it's like, well, like we have cell phones. Cell phones are all these expensive devices that can do a lot of this, and how do we bridge that gap to either sell them a console or at least just be like, oh, you're here. We're going to show up where you are. We're not going to try to move you, because there isn't, 40 years of history saying like, I grew up on the NES, the SNES, and I bought every Nintendo console to date. Now, Chili in chat says 14 actually gives free teleports if you have PS Plus. So there's a perk-based system. I think that's a smart inclusion. I don't think you have to cover the subscription of the game with any kind of service, but it's going to be interesting to see when we start kind of like time boxing it to 5 and 10 years from now, namely because Blue Protocol, MMO, console, support, controller, crossplay, Throne of Liberty, same aspect, console, controller, crossplay support, free to play. New World, I'm going to put money down that's coming to console. It's got controller support on the way. Not free to play, but a buy to play model. Sure. And so all of a sudden, as we start to like new and bigger games start coming out, it's going to be interesting to see if there really is a shift within the MMO space, especially on the heels of, the Microsoft Activision-Blizzard, acquisition, because the worst case scenario, just like my biggest frustration about Microsoft right now is still that it's been how many years since they bought Rare from Nintendo and no Banjo-Kazooie? Like, come on, guys. Like I think one of the things when I see the biggest weakness as a parent, when I look at the Game Pass offerings, I'm like, I want more games that my kids are going to enjoy. And that ends up shifting a lot, from my history to Nintendo. What do you think about any of that?
I think that's Nintendo's point, right? They obviously have historically targeted the younger gamers, and not just the younger gamers, but I think their vision has historically been, hey, let's take affordable technology, right? They have this design philosophy called lateral thinking with weathered technology. Gunpei Yokai, creator of Game and Watch and the Game Boy, kind of really vocalize this, but they say let's not always worry about investing in the most cutting edge technology. Let's invest in technology that's been proven and use it in new ways to innovate. And that's the history of their consoles. And that goes two ways. One, it makes it more affordable because they're targeting parents with kids. They're targeting younger generations that, you don't want to buy a $600 console for. You're gonna, should I buy a PlayStation 5 or a Nintendo Switch Lite? Right. So there's that kind of common consumer question
Yeah.
that people ask. But also, I think Nintendo's vision on game design is always just quintessential fun. And I think with the Switch, you've seen them have more, more mature games on there, and they've done it in different generations. But I think that's Nintendo's bread and butter. And that's why I think they get so much loyalty as people grow up to them as well. But I agree. That's the criticism I think people can fairly vocalize about these big mergers and acquisitions is what happens to studios when they do get absorbed and you don't hear from them for a long time. It's almost like a wasted potential. And I don't think anyone wants that. But yeah, I mean, where's a gold mine? They have so much history of offering some of the best games on consoles, but also, I mean, think about some of the amazing soundtracks that have come from some of their games too, from Donkey Kong Country to Banjo and Kazooie. They know what they're doing. So, I agree. I would be concerned too about, why we're not seeing that type of innovation coming from those developers under Microsoft now.
Well, one of the things that always ends up happening, and one of the reasons why I'm not like hurt by any kind of acquisition personally, is that just like we saw, Steve Hines, he's stepping away from Bethesda now. Like he's stepping away probably with a mountain of cash in his pocket, and if he's bored, they can take that cash and they can go do and create new things and do new things, right? Like one of the things that's interesting is that, and it's really the challenge where we saw like with Sony buying a Bungie, spending 3.6 billion, and a lot of that on retention of those individuals, those key head figures, so they don't just like dip out and say, hey, thanks for the here's the IP, we're going to go now make something even crazier with all the money that you just infused us with. One of the things I see though that benefits indie, that also is a, like, if we think about it in terms of like tilling the soil on ideas that could be risky, those the gamers, the creators who make these things that we love, so they sometimes get locked into like, well, we're just going to have to keep making that thing, and then they could say, man, I wish I had the money and I could go do that. All of a sudden that does happen, and we will see turnover. And I think that's also the downside, is where you could see your favorite IP suffer due to the fact that the people who were passionate and knew everything about it have left, and new people have come in to try to take over that role. I mean, just look at 343 for the longest time. I feel like that in and of itself is a really good example of Microsoft doing a piss poor job at managing one of their key franchises. And so it's not all sunshine and rainbows. You got any thoughts there?
No, I agree. It's a double-edged sword, right? For some of these developers, they're able to lock up security and they're able to pay their employees and not have to worry about the kind of stormy-like nature of the game industry where you release one bad game and you're gone. But I do think you see this from a lot of AAA developers and publishers and figures in that industry where they'll say you're going to see the innovation come from the smaller companies. The indie dev companies can take the risk to try to do something new. So that cycle you're talking about where, someone comes from a bigger studio with a nice lump of cash and now they're going to do something different. I think that's very real. I know there's been a lot of games, Bloodstain, Ritual of the Night, right? That was by the one producer long time at Konami who made a lot of the Castlevania games. He left and started his own company and released possibly one of the better successors to any type of Metroidvania we've seen in a long time. And I think that's the truth is, you're going to see some of these IPs suffer, but you'll eventually see some more innovation come from smaller companies as well.
Now, Fenrir the Black says that'd be cool, but it may run the risk of actually pissing off the older crowd unless they modernize the main line and leave the classic with the fuddy-duddy look in regards to the sub model and all of that. Do you see within just the industry alone, like A, subscription fatigue, but B, that when I look at the sub model for something like WoW and for Final Fantasy 14, I see Game Pass as the ultimate challenge to that. For the same price, you can have one game or you can have access to thousands and thousands of experiences. What do you think?
Subscription fatigue, I think it's real, and I don't think it's even exclusive to games.
Right.
I think you get to this saturation point where everything becomes a subscription model because everyone realizes it's a way to guarantee a more consistent revenue stream for their business. Again, there are benefits to that, but I think one of the criticisms I've seen as well, not just for gaming but media industry in general, is it also creates an incentive for lack of innovation for game companies too. So
Yeah.
I think there's a real fatigue. I've not been to a point where I want to get rid of my Game Pass, even if there's a month or two where I haven't
Yeah.
played anything.
It's locked in for me right now. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's just so much value. But I've definitely canceled other subscriptions I never thought I would because it's at a point where I'm like, I don't need to spend this. And I know you're a financially conscious individual too. So that I'm always evaluating that $5 a month, that $10 a month, that adds up. And did I really even get anything out of it? So
we were looking at actually canceling our Netflix because we just turned on Disney Plus for a little bit. I've been watching the Loki series, actually really enjoying that. And it's refreshing because like Marvel's just been in this weird spot, and with all the news that came out last week, and while this isn't a Marvel show, with Daredevil getting pushed back, I'm like, I really hope that it feels like they were like, yep, we got to run all this stuff on Disney Plus. It's like, yeah, but like make it good. Like, because I ended up skipping Secret Invasion because I just was like, heard it was just absolute garbage. So I'm happy for that. But we went to go cancel Netflix, and we were at like a $10 a month. And they're like, if you come back, it's gonna be $20 a month. We're like, oh crap, like let me think about that. So we decided right now. But then I think about that, running those two, that's $20 a month. If you start adding if you add in my Game Pass, that's we're like that, we're already at $40 a month in terms of just entertainment. And that adds up. Like all of a sudden you're like, no, that's like $480 a year. Like that's not a small insignificant amount of money. That is a decent chunk of change when it's all said and done.
Yeah, and that conversation about Marvel and Disney, I think, is a kind of a quintessential representation of what we're talking about. You get to this point of quantity over quality, because you think it's going to be a good success, but they really saturated that, that line of shows and TV shows. So I'm the same way. I loved all the MCU movies going up to the Avenger kind of climax that we had a few years ago. Then I was exhausted. And similar to Star Wars, I grew up huge Star Wars fan, but then everything they've just been doing with that, I'm like, I don't have time for that. And it is one of those things where if I'm already paying for the subscription of it, I feel like there's this psychology behind it. And I want to ask you this question because I've talked to friends. They'll say, the psychology of a Game Pass or even PS Plus, where they get a game for free. It could be a great game they'll get on PS Plus.
Yeah.
But then they'll play it for a bit and they'll bounce off it, but they don't feel a need to come back and fully experience it because they didn't pay for that game individually. And we're talking about, great games. And I kind of wonder, how does that play into fact with something like a Game Pass at a larger scale, or just a lot of these more, free options you get out there? I don't think it's a detriment to the strategy overall, but I do think it's something interesting I've heard a lot of other gamers talk about, where there's almost, again, that like psychology of the consumer. I don't buy it individually, so it's easier for me to just kind of play for a couple hours and then walk away from, if that makes sense.
I see, in my mind, that ends up seeming like a better way to go about it, because not every game's going to vibe with you. And I would think that could, like, the opposite, like if we started looking at, like, you purchase a game, now you're in a weird way trying to justify the money that you spent. And so you either spend more time with the game than you ever really cared to, or then you go out online and be like, oh, I love this game. And then deep down, you're like, wait a minute, like, there's something, fundamentally there. And that's where we see people use reviews to just try and justify their own spending habits, as opposed to like, what is this game's value? And I think that's what the review needs to evolve into, is like, how do we describe the value that the game gives? Because when it comes down to it, like when you talk about price and purchasing games, there's a lot of games that come out, and $70, I think, ends up hurting the game and the review, where if that game launched at $40 or $50, all of a sudden you would see like people like, oh man, the value is there. It is a really good game. And so I think reviews are somewhat connected to the price of the game, which sucks because we know the price of the game falls quickly over time unless you're Nintendo.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. It kind of reminds me of the old video rental stores back in the day.
Yes,
Yeah, you go pick up a game. I don't know how much it was because my parents would have been paying for it back then, for like a couple bucks, but you played for the weekend, and maybe you hated it, or maybe you go back and you rent it again and again. And
again.
Yeah, and that's an
And
interesting
hope that
point.
your save was on the cart that you got.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, oh man,
Or no one deleted it, right? Because I
yeah,
was I was that jerk that would sometimes go and delete game files just because I don't know, I like to cause chaos. But it is interesting too. Like I know people that play a lot of games. For example, Destiny 2. I love Destiny 2. We've talked about this before.
yeah,
I come back to it and play it when there's new content. I'm not one of those people that sticks with it for the long grind, but I know
hmm
people who put a ton of hours into it, play it all the time, and then they'll sit there and tell me that it's, trash or they hate it. And I'm
yeah,
like, I don't understand because my limited experience, it's got some of the best gun gameplay out of any game ever.
hmm
Like Bungie excels in that area. And also, I'm like, I kind of come down to like, what do you want this game to be for you, right? It
right.
is just a game, right? It's not supposed to be your everything, and I think that fits in more with that price conversation you're talking about too, right? I'm putting all this time in it because I feel like I have to because I spent all this money on it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what's new at video games, aka Kirk, who's at work, and that's why he's not here with us today. He says, is it possible that we could see a premium Game Pass tier with subs to games like WoW and Fallout 76, where those were included? What do you think?
I think it's possible. I think if they look at WoW, like Fallout 76 and any other game that would fall into that tier of needing subscription, I don't see why they again, I imagine they're exploring it, at the very least, they're definitely thinking about it. It makes sense. I don't what do you know? Does anyone know the profit margin on Game Pass right now or anything like that?
I think they just say it's profitable.
Yeah. So
As
yeah,
far as the margin, I have no idea.
again with large acquisitions like this, I've seen it from different industries, not just gaming but like consumer packaged goods. Immediately they look at all the vectors or silos of new products they're getting, and they're looking at ways how to integrate it into their additional marketing distribution strategy to say, hey, how do we improve what we have? So
Right.
I guarantee you there are people in this company going, do we explore this? What are the numbers behind it? What's the potential gain? So
Yeah. And that kind of brings me down to like, what would they also call it? Because like I'm on Game Pass Ultimate, which is PC, console, Game Pass, Ultimate, more Ultimate. Like how do we name this? How do we structure this? Or essentially, do they just make the Ultimate tier more expensive and bring in a mid tier that is the current version? I would fully support that, right? When it
yeah,
comes down to it, like if all of a sudden they add in like a WoW sub, they add in a Fallout 76, ESO like premium, like I think that there is a value there. I don't know what the market would like welcome, right? Because at
yeah,
some point we're talking about subscription fatigue. Are you spending $30 a month just on your subscriptions? Within gaming, within one company, like that feels like that could be like especially with inflation and everything going on with
yeah,
your budget. You're like, holy smokes, like oh, I don't know if I can keep that up, and it just makes sense to kind of turn things on and off,
yeah.
as needed.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Like I've resubscribed and canceled my subscription to WoW numerous times as I try to get back into it. But if Microsoft looks at the numbers and says it doesn't hurt us if we somehow package Game Pass in with these other game subscriptions
Mhm.
at a higher
Yeah.
price, maybe it is worthwhile for me to get that because then I could say, hey, I'm almost spending less overall per month for all of these games now because I want to go back to WoW when I can, but I don't want to pay for it monthly. If it's just a marginal increase on my Game Pass versus that whole additional WoW subscription, I, that could make sense in that kind of middle area.
hmm And according to Zarias Rikus, and man, I suck at saying names. Google says that Game Pass makes 230 million in revenue in 1 month, but that doesn't tell us the profit margin. But it's still like I would love if I was making 230 million dollars in revenue at all.
Yeah,
Like you over a lifetime, that would be amazing. I would absolutely thrilled by that kind of income. The
yeah, it's
Go ahead.
crazy to see those numbers and then realize too that at the end of the day, for Microsoft, that the gaming division is still kind of one of the more less profitable, not just profitable, I should say, less revenue generation
Mhm.
business segments. It's
Yeah.
been growing over the last decade, but I mean, they have, things like Office 365 and all these other services that just make astronomical amount of numbers. So even a division that's making that much revenue is still going to get scrutinized to see what is the ultimate profit at the end of the day too,
Mhm.
which is crazy to think about.
So with Activision Blizzard now being a part of the Xbox ecosystem, what is your vision, or what would be the thing that you would be like absolutely thrilled for any kind of announcement from that company?
I would love to see things like a new Tony Hawk. Like
Oh
that
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remastered, that did really well. I think that sold more. I have to look at the numbers, but I feel like that had some pretty high sales numbers for the franchise overall. And it kind of surprised me that Activision didn't announce a new one after that. So maybe there's some people that are passionate about that within Microsoft to say, hey, let's get this on the ground running. I'd love to see more Crash related games.
Yeah.
It kind of comes down to some of their IPs that you just don't see often that I'd love to see more because we know we're going to get Call of Duty. We know we're going to see that integrated into Game Pass. Diablo as well. I wonder how they integrate that into Game Pass too, in terms of how they're going to have their continued seasons and subscriptions and DLC and all that too. So, but yeah, my biggest wish would be Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Give me a new Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It's one of my favorite games of all time.
Like when I think about like, I would love to see a kart racer. Like when I think about like Mario Kart and how there were so many, Mario Kart clones. We saw Diddy Kong Racing, saw the Crash Bandicoot, etc. Like when it comes to the IP, and we talk about Rare, like it's like it'd be interesting to see like, hey, we're gonna let this come because they have all these different studios. Now they have these IPs. Like what game do we want to make that we feel is missing? And I look at like when you start looking at like where's gaps, where is the gap that Xbox still has. And I think of it as in terms of Japan. And I think about it in terms of also more games that are rated E for everyone, more opportunity. Cause like bringing in like somebody was like, oh, why do you like Game Pass? I'm like, how many kids do you have? And they're like, okay, touche. Like, yeah, the reason I love is the kids they're playing all these different games. They're trying them out. And then, yeah, maybe they sit them down or maybe they keep playing them. But ultimately I'm not having to go out and spend, endless amounts of money on games that would be B or C tier,
yeah, like, again, that's the rental store phenomenon all over again, right? That gives you that avenue.
Yeah.
A kart racer would be sweet. I mean, if you think about how many, again, IPs they do have from now Doom Guy to everything else, they could do something with that, whether it's a Smash Brothers type clone that has been growing in popularity. I don't know how like there's a lot of potential, and Crash Team Racing is probably one of the best kart alternatives out there compared to Mario Kart, in my opinion. So
yeah,
they somehow worked with that engine and that gameplay model and brought everything else into the fold. It could be successful for sure.
Did you just confirm that Warner Brothers is the next acquisition by Microsoft?
I mean, I don't think that business segment for Warner Brothers is doing well. They don't have a lot. Yeah. So who knows? My God, I mean, yeah, I could see it happening.
So where do you think Microsoft is going next though? Like outside of like, because Warner Brothers could definitely be in the ballpark, but like, do you see them trying to step into and partner with somebody like Sega? And I say partner because I think that's the easiest road within into the Japanese market. Because after 10%, you'd have to get government approval. What do you think?
I think that I know this was something talked about a lot the other week or so with Nintendo and Microsoft being discussed. I think Microsoft is at a point where their next big hurdle is to get more penetration into the Asian markets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that definitely comes with getting partnerships with companies like that. So, I don't know what purchasing Sega would look like, but Sega looks like a good partner for them for a lot of reasons. One, they just bought Rovio, which is a, Angry Birds mobile game developer. They've been very clear that a part of the reason they wanted Activision was for King, because they want to also make their own mobile game store as well. And so if you could somehow integrate some of those Rovio games in there, I think that makes sense. I don't think it's going to be another acquisition anytime soon. I think they spent a lot of money, just legally speaking, on defending this. And I think they probably want to sit back and optimize what they have and find out, more creative ways to get into the Asian markets as well. Because that is one of their deficits, right? They've known this for decades now. They need more JRPGs. They need more games that appeal to that market. And they're definitely looking at that.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk a little bit about Halo. Halo Season 5 is releasing tomorrow. And if anybody's been following the development of this game, the biggest thing and the biggest news, it was from a year ago, basically, where they let go of the leadership team. The leadership team, I think, has been one of the things really holding back Halo. And since then, from like when we look at the fruits of their labor, Season 4, I think really was firing on all cylinders. Season 5 seems that it's going to step up and deliver things that the community has long been requesting. There's still, I think, plenty of work to be done, features to be added, but it feels like Season 4, Season 5 is like, man, if the game launched in this state, I think it would do pretty well. What are your thoughts overall on what we know is coming to season 5?
So I'm obviously very happy that Halo Infinite is seeing the more recent surge. When it came out, I loved it, and we've
Mhm.
talked about this before. Their battle pass approach, I
Yeah,
think, is top because again,
top tier.
yeah, that fact when I still go back to this day, I'm still working on my,
Mhm.
first battle passes, and I don't feel bad about that, where I regret sometimes when I, buy a Fortnite battle pass or even a Call of Duty battle pass.
Yeah.
So I love that. Halo is still one of those games that I think is again, people call it a, my young nephew calls it a boomer game. I'm like, I don't know, but it's still one of my favorite types of games that I could go back to and play all the time. So a lot of the
Mhm.
features they're doing with Halo season 5, it's great to see. I watched that video reaction you guys did the other week. So yeah,
That was
I am
awesome.
yeah, I am equally excited. The question of like if it launched in this state, would it have been better off? Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
But I also think too they did some type of internal analysis where they kind of realized, hey, Halo brand equity is high enough that even if we release it in the state it is now, and how we're releasing it on Game Pass, we don't have to make sure it's where we want it to be 5 years from now. We just need to consistently build it up to that place. But the fact that they did restructure their leadership
Yeah.
makes me think Microsoft wasn't happy with it enough, which
Oh
is
yeah.
exciting to see. And I think I would make this prediction that over the next 2 years, there's more people playing Halo Infinite consistently than the first few years of launch for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree 100% with the battle pass. In fact, the battle pass is so good. Like, I know I'm going to play the next Destiny expansion. Like, there's just not a way that I'm not going to sit here and play the next expansion,
Sure.
even though I did not like the current one. I thought Lightfall was just awful.
Yeah.
But I want to see where the story goes. I want, like I'm again Destiny. However, I won't be buying the collector's edition because I used to. I won't because those battle passes expire and I never spend enough time to really truly complete it. And it always ends up, I think, driving me more out of the game, where Halo is driving me into the game. Where I think the idea is that FOMO is to capture the audience. And I think ultimately, like that works for a short period of time, but then your brain starts to reject it. It doesn't bring you joy. It makes you feel like,
Yeah.
oh man, I really would have liked to not go and play this game tonight. I would like to go do this other thing, but now I'm feeling like I'm losing money by doing this. Halo doesn't give me that. Like,
Yeah.
I have all the battle passes. I literally am about to cap out my first battle pass. I'll do that today. And then the best news of all, I'll go equip a previous battle pass. And then tomorrow, like maybe I'll work on season 5 battle pass, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
I'll just equip one of the other ones. And that's also the best news, guys. If you haven't seen or on the Discord, links also in the description. This Thursday, we're going to be doing a Halo community game night. We'll be running custom games. So even if you feel like you're not a good Halo player, don't worry. We'll figure out on balancing teams. You're not going. It's not about just making everybody just feel like miserable. We'll find game types and do crazy things that will make it fun. And guess what? You're going to progress your battle pass the entire time. In fact, Kirk says, Brian, they're also changing it to a 50 tier pass where the first 20 tiers are all free, no purchase required. I think that is a really good move
Yeah.
by the team. And the custom games thing is a really good move because one of the things is like, stop punishing people for having fun. Just let them have fun. They spent the money. Like nobody's out there going like, ha ha ha, I finished the battle pass before everybody else. And I'm the best at Halo. It's like, you could suck and you can still finish the battle pass. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, Halo 2, probably spent most of my time on Halo 2 playing custom games online. And the fact that they're now going to reward you right with that experience from those custom games for the battle pass, that's just another win. That the whole FOMO thing, you're 100% spot on because I could tell you I have one good month with a game like Fortnite and I'm loving it, but then I don't finish that battle pass and I end up uninstalling it for some reason or the other. That comes to my memory and I go, I don't want to install it again right now because of that like bad taste in my mouth. I imagine if you're a younger gamer and you have a lot more time on your hands, that probably doesn't affect you as much because you probably could burn through that. But for most people who've got jobs or kids or family or all of that, like this is, I think, the way in the future. And I really hope it has a lot of success, Halo Infinite specifically. So more companies, maybe like Call of Duty's games, maybe they start to borrow from that model too, and they realize that it's a net win overall.
Yes, 100%. Now, when I look at it, and here's an interesting kind of like kind of thing that other companies does. Wayfinder, they have the where you can only purchase the battle pass during the season, which has that FOMO aspect to purchase, but it doesn't punish you because you can equip your battle pass. And like you said, like and what we're all I think being saying, like I think that's the evolution that battle passes truly need to really be fair to the developers and fair to the players, right? Because it's a fun piece of content. You can see your reward track. You're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and opt into this and I'm going to get these rewards, or I'm going to finish the pass and then I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and buy it and just open up all the rewards at once, and however that kind of flows. And for me, I'm like, I have no problem rewarding the studios with money, right? Like I think I'm like, hey, you make a good game, here's money, please continue to make this. And I think the battle pass, especially when you look at it compared to the loot boxes, because the battle pass system truly replaced the loot box system, but I think it still needs that a little bit of polish to it overall for the rest of the industry. And again, like I'd love to see Destiny. I'm wondering what Marathon's going to do, because that's one of my biggest frustrations. Like when I talk about like why Halo 5 season 4 and Halo 4 season Halo 4, Halo Infinite season 4 and 5 is so appealing, is that Destiny, I think, has really dropped the ball in the PvP arena space. Ooh. And it feels so much better to play this. And I'm happy they're making a PvP war council, with Bungie. But it kind of, in a way, is a little bit too late. We kind of know that you've been investing in Marathon, and I don't fault you for that investment. I'm very curious about that game, but Halo is filling that niche right now. What are your thoughts?
Destiny 2 PvP is I love, like I said, the gameplay in Destiny 2. I love it. PvP, I actively avoid it just because it's one of those things where if you haven't been investing all this time, in my experience, it's really hard to have fun. If you just want to go in for a casual moment, you'll get ripped apart pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But no, I agree with that. I'm also curious to see what they do with their new game they're releasing. It just left my brain. Marathon. Thank you. Yeah. It's cool to see that they're bringing back that IP. I've not been big on extraction shooters. Quite honestly, I've not really messed around a lot with them. But I mean, I hope it's successful. Again, anytime Bungie's behind a first-person shooter, I want to try it just because I still, like I said, I think they're premier with terms of gameplay and control and how that feels. So yeah, I'm excited to see it. But yeah, to that point, Halo is, again, it's at this point where if it gets the right momentum, it could take advantage of a lot of gaps in the market right now in terms of what people are looking for. So, again, wait and see. But yeah, Halo's the game that still gets the most time out of me out of any other of those first-person shooters.
Have you ever played Titanfall 2?
Titanfall 2, I've heard from. You'll like this. Talking about supporting developers, I bought Titanfall 2 on my PC for like $5, on my PlayStation for like $5, and on my Xbox for like $5. I've not played it yet because every single time I buy it, I'm like, it's only $5. I'll play it. I haven't got to it yet, but I've heard it's the best campaign ever in a first-person shooter. So, and this comes from my developers over at Devour Games. They'll hammer that home. Titanfall 2 is amazing. So, yeah, haven't done it yet though.
Yeah, we're seeing a resurgence within Titanfall 2, which is exciting to see. I've seen people were sharing numbers that when it comes down to like Battlefield 4082, which I've never played any of the Battlefield games, that in and of itself is seeing a big draw. A lot of people kind of checking it out, returning to it. What would you think would be a real big draw outside of what they've announced to season 5 to have Halo start to see that same level of like interest? Because when you look at just the shooting numbers out there, Halo is on the lower end in the long run.
Yeah. Again, this is probably cliche, but a battle royale, I feel like is it.
Yeah.
Just because that's so popular with a lot of the younger gamers out there. And again, even me, I never liked battle royales when they came out. I played PUBG once and I was like, this is too stressful for me. Fortnite was a change for me. I was like, I can't believe I enjoy a battle royale. And I think giving me a game like Halo, which I'm decent at, and putting that in battle royale mode and maybe doing something different with it, I think that will do a lot in the short run to get people to invest into it again. And then with everything else they have there, I think they'll be able to retain a lot of those new players as well.
I know when I typically suggest the battle royale, a lot of people end up saying like, oh, we want Halo to do something unique and new and innovative. And I completely agree, but
sure. Yeah.
Like that in and of itself is so easy to say. Then it's like, okay, well, what does that look like? Right. Because like all of these things that, kind of end up evolving organically. If they don't do a battle royale, I'd love to see something on that same scale, that massive map, lots of players, and something happening. Because it doesn't have to be a battle royale. You could end up having a team deathmatch, but it's like 50 versus 50, a lot of chaos going on with maybe an objective or two that does something like that. In and of itself would be something I would be fine with. But I think it's that scale that I feel Halo is truly lacking, and a battle royale brings that level of scale, and it clearly is a source for especially the youth that are looking for that kind of game. That's what they want to play right now, and it feels, I think, unfair, and that's the word I'm going to use, to Halo as a franchise, that it shouldn't be allowed to compete. I'd love to see what that looks like. I think it doesn't mean that it needs to replace what Halo is, but it's not even offering it. And then you go and, like, I was talking about this, and I was talking about this on Twitter, and every example that people are showing, in terms of the shooter numbers, are all battle royales. Yeah, this one's bringing in 400,000 players a month. Yeah, that's a battle royale. Arena shooters have been struggling, and it's almost in a way kind of a generational thing. Like, yes, we all grew up on arena shooters. This is great. But when you look at where all the eyeballs are, where all the hours are being played, and you're like, it's the same reason when they brought Mario to the phone. I was like, I'm happy for that, because there's whole gamers out there who've never played a Mario game or have ever heard of Mario. Why are we going to just let them just like age out and never have any kind of connection to this franchise?
Exactly. And with Mario, with that example, that brings people, again, who have never played Mario, to then go to their parents and say, hey, can you buy me a Nintendo Switch? I want to play more Mario games, just like that movie did too, I'm sure.
Oh, Mario movie was amazing.
That was a good fun time. Halo, I'm empathetic for people that might criticize a battle royale for Halo under the idea that, again, we want innovation. There's all these battle royale clones. I could understand that desire for innovation, but I think because there's been numerous entries that are battle royales that fail. But I think what makes Halo different is what you see with a lot of the other more successful battle royales, is that it's built on a foundation of a already successful shooter. Like look at Call of Duty's battle royale. I think Halo would capture the same thing, and just like people playing Mario on the phone, then wanting to go and explore the rest of Mario's library, I think Halo Infinite getting a battle royale would make people want to play all the other Halo Infinite modes, whether it's campaign or just classic, Team Slayer and all that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly, we're on the same page with that. I am Prute says that wasn't there rumors of Halo working on a battle royale, decided to make its own game outside of Halo Infinite. I believe that's still going on. And I do, whether it's outside of Infinite or not, the ideal would be it's somewhat connected, right? You get your battle pass, you want to play this, like not having to like sit here and try to divide yourself between two games. But who knows what will end up happening now. But with that, if that does come to fruition, that will be another opportunity to reinvite players back in that's also have laps, because no matter what, that's a huge news story. When you can see gameplay, you can talk about the game, like, hey, this is how it feels, this is how it plays. And then it would be interesting to see how it shakes out in the long run. Does that bring people back? What do you think about Halo coming to PlayStation? Do you think that's ever a possibility?
That's a great question. There's a part of me that thinks Phil Spencer has probably already thought about it and maybe even proposed it. Like, I'm surprised we haven't seen something like that, because I think Microsoft's model anymore isn't just about selling consoles. I think they're all about selling, something more than that. So I am sure they would love to put Game Pass on PlayStation. I am sure that that's the case. PlayStation, I could see PlayStation being the person in that room to say no, and I get why PlayStation would say no. But yeah, I could see Microsoft wanting that again, along with Game Pass. Do I see it happening anytime soon? No, I don't.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a while. Especially when I think about it, even just from a multiplayer perspective, like, why is Call of Duty so beloved? Why is all these games, like every game that's competing against Halo, is on every platform, as opposed to Halo, which is like now on PC and on console, but it's not on PlayStation. It's not on Switch. And honestly, I think it should. I think they need to go and, really think about, like, if you want to keep the campaign locked, I'm not pro console wars. I'm not pro exclusives. I'm like, I think it just put it on PlayStation. It will benefit the game and the community. But I get the historical context of like, oh, this is Xbox. This is Xbox. I think Xbox is beyond Halo, and we clearly saw that with the Activision-Blizzard, the
Yeah.
Bethesda, like, and who knows what's to come next. I saw somebody like posting rumors or something like about how it's Square Enix in the first quarter announcement. And it's like, we'll see. The Square
Yeah.
Enix stock price is down, but if anybody was in the market for Square Enix, like I couldn't put it past Sony, but I won't be surprised if Xbox does make that kind of offer to Square Enix as well. Anything can happen, guys. Like,
Yeah.
we've seen in this last couple years alone, big shifts, big changes, and I think more big changes to come.
Yeah, I mean, look at PlayStation putting a lot of its games, first party games, on PC now too, right? Not just their single player games, but supposedly all of the, more games as a service type games they've been investing in. They have to explore putting that on PC and not just PlayStation, simply because those types of games depend on a large player base that's consistent, right?
Yeah.
And console player bases can sometimes fluctuate based on other flagship games that are hitting the system at the time. So, maybe there's a future down the road where there's less consoles, quote unquote, on the market, but there's still a lot of the same players. And yeah, I mean, again, if you're going to make a large competitive battle royale or first person shooter, it only benefits you to put it on as many systems or, places to play as possible, simply for that player base.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that comes to the end of all the different topics that I had to discuss as a part of the podcast itself. Do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything that you'd like to kind of take a lead on the show here for the last couple of minutes before we wind down? Or if
No,
Chad has any questions?
again, I am happy that the merger's finalized, just from that news cycle and exhaustion associated with it and all the ups and downs with it. That's I'm looking forward to what comes out of that. Some of those ideas you talked about, like a kart racer, that would be great to see. What I'm most excited about, and I know you're excited about this too, is Super Mario Brothers Wonders coming out this week.
This week,
That
baby.
Yeah, that's gonna be great. I mean, these 2 weeks in general, I think, have been a really prime month for gaming. I'm currently playing Lords of the Fallen on PlayStation. That's a really cool Souls-like type game. I really enjoy the vibe there. But yeah, now we got Sonic Superstars coming out tomorrow, and then Super Mario and Spider-Man 2 as well, which Spider-Man 2, I mean, Sony doesn't even have to put marketing behind it, and that game will do extremely well. But
It's
yeah, so
Insomniac. Insomniac is like such an incredible studio. I love what Insomniac produces.
agreed.
I really wish we would see another Infamous though, But Spider-Man in a way is kind of taking that and then now, but then we're also going to be working on a Wolverine game. So that's going to be really interesting because I really enjoyed those back in the day, even though those were movie tie-in games. So they weren't really the best games, but they were still fun as all get out. And then what will be interesting to see, because like obviously like rumors of Microsoft wanting to buy Nintendo. I think everybody would want to buy Nintendo.
Sure.
Microsoft, Amazon, Tencent are probably the only companies that could buy Nintendo. And who knows what will if that will ever shake out in the long run. But man, when it comes down to it, Amazon's been picking up the Lord of the Ring license, the Tomb Raider license. We're seeing Embracer kind of in a way start to self-implode. Turns out just buying companies and not necessarily releasing games, kind of not the best strategy. But that does mean, like, when I start to think about just the acquisition market, I don't think we're done seeing those. I think probably you could see Embracer be acquired. You could see Amazon hungry to pick up any and all new IP. This is going to be an IP, and Embracer holds so much IP that we talk about. The downside about all this is that you buy up these games and these IPs and then you do nothing with them and you just let them sit out there, and that's not fun for anybody. But I get it from a development perspective, because you got to find the right people who want to make that game, and that doesn't necessarily always line up 1-to-1.
Again, I wouldn't be surprised if Embracer starts to sell off one by one all those different franchises they bought simply because they need to. And again, not a surprise at all. Whenever that happened, I was like, that's a shame, because I have a friend that worked for a couple oh gosh, what was the one? Deep Silver. I had a friend that lost his job a few months ago from Deep Silver, and he's still looking for work because there's so many layoffs happening in the industry. But I could see an Amazon picking more game companies up. I could also see Apple, because and I don't know what they would do with it, but I know that they've realized we need to get more into gaming, and I could just see them doing something that surprises all of us as well.
Yeah, and then also the rumor that Disney, or at least the EA acquisition. So what that tells me though is that we know EA's for sale. EA is
Yeah.
shopping around trying to be bought. And it's funny to me because I'm not a big fan of EA that nobody seems to be jumping on that.
Yeah.
Imagine me like, hey guys, we have oh wait, most of our stuff is licensed through others, and those deals cost a lot of money. And sure, we make a lot of money over on this end, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Because the fact is, like we talked about at the top of the show, Battle.net, all the different like publishers having their own launchers, just how much of a nightmare that's been. And to see that, going away is a good thing. And ultimately, where, I get a lot of people are anti, consolidation, but consolidations on, from 1,000 different ways of playing your game to like, here's a handful of different ways ends up, as long as there's a choice, I think I'm going to be okay with that.
Agreed completely. Yeah, EA, man, it is true. Like so much of their business does depend on so many other licenses that it probably isn't that attractive to a lot of companies. Disney, on the other hand, they already have, the ESPN brand. A lot of those brands are already underneath them. So there is a strategic alignment there. So if anyone was to do it, I could see it being them. But that also comes down to Disney. I mean, Disney's talked about selling. There's been rumors of that the last few months as well. About even Apple buying them too. And
Disney has a $40 billion cash that they have to buy there because they're contracted to buy out the rest of Hulu at the start of next year. And that's like $40 billion. And it's like, and with all their movies and everything just bombing and losing subscriptions, like they're in a weird spot. And I could see, if anything, Apple buying Disney. I could see that them just closing on that deal.
Agreed. Apple has such a substantial business that's consistent with everything else they do. It really would be valuable to them. And Bob Iger, now that he's back in charge, he has a history of not being afraid to just say, hey, it doesn't make sense anymore. Let's cut it. I think he's tried to sell off ABC back in the day when he was president of that company, and eventually, Disney bought them too. So yeah, wait and see. But yeah, who knows? Who knows what will happen?
All right, man. Well, how can people find your content, and what do you got coming up?
Yeah, well, like I said, Devour Games, you could find us at devourgames.com. That's DEVHOUR.com. It was meant to be a play on, our games will devour your time. So you could find our, website there, and you can find our game on Nintendo Switch and Steam. But you can also find me at Mark Liberto on Twitter or X, and then Joyful's Arcade on YouTube and Twitch. I try to put a video up every week or so. Like I said, I'm currently working on some game reviews, like over the games I just mentioned, Sonic Superstars, Super Mario Wonder. I want to give those games a good look at. But yeah, you can find me there on YouTube. I'm most active with content on YouTube at the moment.
Sweet. Guys, I've got him tagged in the description of this podcast and video, so be sure to go give Mark a follow. I'll also try to add in more of his links once the show is finished processing as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to the live show. If you're watching this as a VOD, be sure to hit that like button, as it's a great way of helping out. Also, leave a comment in on the VOD as well. Those are great ways of supporting the content. And we will be back here in 2 weeks. We do the show every other week, every other Monday. Covering the news and all kinds of good stuff going on. So hopefully we will see you back then at that time. But until then, see you.
Epic Loop Radio. Epic Loop Radio.